Hey there, and welcome once again to the Great Stories podcast. You have found it. I am Ryan Weber, your host for the show. What this is a podcast designed to invite you into the lives of real people who call themselves followers of Christ. These stories are, sometimes they're just entertaining, they're silly, they can get deep, they're heavy-duty testimony type things. Some people cry. But the whole point of this is that you get to just peek for a couple hours into the lives of real people who have real stories about following a real God. These are unscripted, unrehearsed, unedited, and uninterrupted. So these are as real as it gets. And it's a privilege to do these, and I'm so glad you're listening. You can follow the show on Facebook at The Great Stories Podcast on Facebook. Same name on Instagram. If you would like to support the show, you can do so on patreon.com. There's an account there. You can throw some bucks that way. Everything's appreciated. There's a little cost that comes into these kind of things, and anything is super helpful. I'm kind of celebrating right now that the Great Stories podcast just popped over about 1,300 total downloads, which is crazy to think about that many people are listening to this show, and I found it something they want to keep doing. That's so cool. And I don't know if there's some kind of metrics behind this. I'm not an expert in podcasting. I just talk. But I think it's opened up a couple avenues with other platforms recently. So we're also putting these up on iHeartRadio now, on the Google Play Music store. We're also on YouTube, which is, it's a video site, but apparently you can just upload audio. So it's a blank video, but you get the audio for the show also. And where else is it? Spotify also just picked it up. So it's pretty cool. I'm excited for those platforms because that just gets the opportunity for more people to hear these great stories. And I say this all the time, and you can't say it often enough, I don't think, that really what people talk about on this show and what's already been talked about by other guests this is the most important thing anyone has to say, is that who is Jesus? What does it mean? And to invite people into our lives, to just see God through our eyes and through our lives, I think is a huge tool that God uses to reach those who are lost, who need to hear that message. I always say, for every person who sits across from me in my living room here, there's 1,000 other ones just like them who need to hear the same thing that they are going through. So, again, other ways to support the show, of course, share these episodes, get the word out, put it up on your Facebook, send a link out. If we talk to someone that reminds you of someone else, that's a great opportunity. Like, hey, I heard this interview, I thought of you, check it out, that kind of thing. I'm not doing this so that my name can be great. I'm doing this so Christ's name can be great. And I want that message to get out, so let's do it. So today, this is a little bit of an odd episode. I had a super busy month or so, and on top of that, my voice was gone for about 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know why that happens. Every January, my voice just disappears. And on top of that, I had a guest that I was going to have on. Scheduling didn't work out, and it just didn't happen. So we don't have a guest on the show today, but that's okay. Something they tell me in podcasting is that one of the keys to it is to put out consistent, frequent content. And rather than just tell you, hey, whatever, like nothing this week, we'll just wait for the next one. I don't think so. I think there's plenty that we could talk about here if I just fly solo for a while. It won't be quite as long as the normal format, because I don't think anybody wants to sit there and listen to me talk for 3 hours. But I got a couple things I'm going to go through today that I think will be worth listening to. So, with that, welcome to my living room. The dog is sitting right here. I got a nice glass of Burgundy in my hand, and we're going to have a couple chats about some important things. So, here we go. All right, so there's the bumper music. Just wanted a little interruption there. So what I'm going to do is there's basically two areas that I want to get into. The first one, I'm going to talk a little bit about truck driving. It's just a fascinating area for a lot of people. When I tell them some stories about that, it's a different thing to drive a semi-truck in the Bay Area. And it's such a contrast to my other job. I work as a children's minister. So I write curriculum and I teach Sunday school for 1st through 5th graders. So it's a heck of a contrast between trucking and youth ministry. And then for the second portion, I'm going to actually go back through and just talk about the weekend that I had last week. I went up to Tahoe with a group of, I think there was 78 high schoolers. And I know a lot of you just went, oh, but I didn't. I was like, yeah, let's go. And it was a blast. So I'm just going to share some of what went down in that and just some of the highlights and lowlights and just what a crazy weekend. So first of all, let's talk about trucking. So I work right now for a company called Sun State Equipment, and I just hit my 6-year mark working for them. And it's been a crazy experience to be a trucker. So my original intent for learning to drive trucks was as a resume builder to be a firefighter. And I figured that if I could drive, a full-blown semi-truck, then, a fire engine should be super simple. So I got the truck driving license, and then, I haven't given my full testimony on the show yet, and I'm not going to do it tonight, but the firefighting became an impossibility because of a back injury that I picked up. And I've talked about that a little bit here and there. But so after, the injury, the firefighting wasn't an option, but I had this trucking license. So I started driving trucks to make money. And one of my favorite areas of trucking is machinery hauling. And I've done a couple different kinds. I drove a dump truck for a while, and I drove freight, all around the Bay Area here in California. But I kind of settled into machinery hauling because I just feel like it's the most fun possible sort of trucking. It's just really neat because you get the truck driving aspect of it, and you're not just restricted to normal like loading docks and industrial areas. I think with machinery hauling, it's interesting because people build things that require machinery in the craziest places. And I get to go to the neatest spots just all over the Bay Area. I found some crazy, just back roads and just weird things that you would never know are there unless, you have a job like mine and it just takes you there. One example is this whole Tesla factory in Fremont. It's pretty restricted. Like you can't just go in there and walk around and see the factory floor and the robots working on stuff and all that. Not many people really get to see all that. I guess they do tours, but they're guided and, you can't just wander around wherever you want to go. But if anybody knows anything about the Tesla plant is that they're constantly constructing things. So there's just machinery going in and out of there all the time. And I'm there so often that the people at the back gate, they know us and they just let you drive right in and they just wave at you. They don't even check your ID, whatever. You could be anybody. I don't know. I'm here to steal your secrets, but they just let us drive in there. And, sometimes this can be frustrating, but it's also kind of fun because they'll send me in there to pick up a machine and all they'll tell me is it's at Tesla. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have any idea how huge Tesla is? It's basically a whole city. Where am I going to find this? I don't know. Call a customer. Well, customers never answer the phone. And so there's been several times when I just have to park the truck and start walking. And I spend an hour and a half, 2 hours just walking all over that plant. And I'm walking through areas where there's obviously, like, you're not supposed to be here. Like, you could just tell. But nobody cares. I'm wearing my reflective vest, and I got a hard hat on, and I'm carrying a clipboard. So that must mean I'm supposed to be there. Oh, and I got a bunch of keys, too. So that means you're important if you got keys to everything. And that's just one of the spots I've gotten to go. But there's crazy thing. Just, I think going up into San Francisco is one of the most interesting spots that I go to trucking because it's just unimaginably dense up there. And just driving a regular car in San Francisco can be a maddening experience. But take your car, multiply it by 10, cruise around there with a 80,000 pound gross vehicle weight. And, part of me loves it because it's hard and it's dangerous and it's tight. And, there's a caveman in me, a Viking, that wants to conquer hard things. But the other part of me is just terrified because you make one little mistake and you're guaranteed at a minimum, you're going to do big property damage or run something over, or, there's cable car lines and I'm moving machinery that's taller than them. And it's like, super nerve wracking. And, but there's construction going on there and you got to get there and you got to do it. I'm really thankful for the times when I make a delivery up there and it's right next to the freeway. I just get off, drop it, get back on. It's like a hit and run. It's beautiful. But one of the stories I wanted to tell about trucking was at actually a job that I had before I worked for Sunstate Equipment. It was for a company in Newark called All American Rentals. And I want to make sure I say that in case any of you Sunstate coworkers of mine are listening. This is pre-Sunstate, so please don't tell the bosses about this story because they don't know. But you're going to know. So I was working for All American Rentals, and I was brand new machinery hauler. I'd driven a little dump truck before. It was nothing like a full-blown semi. So this was the first time that I'd really been out in an 18-wheeler, and I was moving heavy machines. And I would start and end in Newark every day because that's where our yard was. But, in a given day, you can go, as far as you can drive one direction and still make it back, by nightfall, right? And I had this delivery that was in Napa. And it was to some winery, one of these old building restoration projects where they like dig around this historic landmark and they jack the thing up. And I guess they were going to move this whole building somewhere. It's really weird. But it takes machinery to do that. And what I had was a big forklift and a couple of real heavy-duty generators, big ones. The generators that they're like probably 12 feet long, maybe 8 feet tall, 4 feet wide. They got wheels under them. They're meant to be towed behind like a truck, so the truck that I had, I actually used the forklift and I put them on the truck and then drove the forklift on behind those. And this is a pretty big forklift. This is a forklift with a capacity to lift about 20,000 pounds. So this is a heavy duty deal. And, so I was cruising out there. It's a long drive. Napa's it's a good drive for a truck from Newark. It took me, a couple hours to get where I was going to go. It was a gorgeous day, but it had rained, I guess, for the previous 2 or 3 days. So you know how those days are. It's just, the air is clear. It smells good. All the funk is out of the air. Everything looks nice and the sky is blue. It's beautiful. So I was cruising out there. And I was getting off, pretty off the beaten path because there's a lot of vineyards up there and there's a lot of country roads and just kind of back street type of thing. So I got off the highway. I think it was, oh boy, I forget which highway it was. I think it was Highway 12. Is that even a thing? I don't know. It was out there. It was in Napa. Okay. And so you get off the highway. And, there's bigger roads out into the neighborhoods and the vineyards. And then, okay, turn left and a little bit smaller road. And then you turn again onto basically what is a one-lane road. It's paved, but it's basically just a glorified driveway. And I'm driving on this thing for a couple of miles. And I'm cruising along and I'm looking for this address. And the tricky things with addresses a lot of times out in construction sites and all that is the satellite maps don't really know exactly where things are a lot of times because they haven't been there long enough or, it's still a construction project. So a lot of times the maps aren't updated. And so you're just relying on landmarks or whatever the customer tells you to look out for. Anyway, I missed the turn into the driveway that I was supposed to go in, which isn't super my fault because there wasn't clearly marked. And there was a piece of plywood with a small address spray painted onto it, which I couldn't see until I came back from the other way. So I passed the thing, and I way past it. I was like half mile, maybe a mile past it, and I came to this big gate, like a gated community, and I was thinking like something's wrong. Like this is private property. Like this is not what I'm looking for. Something is up here, and I ended up putting it together, just looking at the maps and all that. That I had at some point I had passed the thing, that I was looking for. I was like, crud. And if you know anything about trucks, it's not like you can just, do a little 3-point turnaround. Like you're long. You can't turn around everywhere. And I've been in a lot of spots like that where you're just on this narrow road and you're driving. You're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get out of here because I can't turn around and I'm not going to back up for 10 miles. And this was one of those cases. And so I just kept going forward. And eventually, I came across like sort of a T in the road, but it was basically somebody's private driveway. But it was wide. It was it had like gravel down the center and dirt on the sides. And I thought that this looks wide enough for me to. What I'll do is I'll back in to the driveway as far as I can, and then I'll turn left. So the driveway's on my right, so I'll back up to the right, and then when I'm in the driveway, I'll just come back out of the driveway forward and, make a left back the way that I came. And so here's how you do it. If you're in a truck, you pass the thing that you want to back into, so the driveway's on my right, and I drive past it, and then I start backing up, and I start... the back end of the truck starts going out to the right, and it goes up into the driveway, and it's looking good. And, it was going a little bit wider than I wanted, so the trailer was actually, going off the rocks a little bit on the far side there, but that's okay, whatever. So I kept going back. And then I started going a little bit slower, and this is where experience comes into play, because what I didn't realize... What I now realize, and I think what I would know now, is that the trailer was actually sinking into the mud that were on the sides of this fella's driveway to his property. As soon as it got off the rocks, it was real squishy. Oh, and the part I didn't say, I had actually gotten out of the truck ahead of time, and I walked over there, and I walked around on the gravel and tried the dirt and just to see... Like, is this going to support a truck? And it's foolish to do that because I'm a heavy guy. I'm in the high 200s. But the truck I'm driving is like 65,000 pounds. It puts a different kind of stress on the ground. So it can feel firm to me, but this truck is going to go right into it. And that's exactly what happened. But I didn't pick up on it. So I kept going. And it wasn't long before... the truck just stopped moving. And this is when I'm fully in this guy's driveway now. I'm backed into the driveway. The street, that I was on is in front of me. And I'm now looking like basically across the road, perpendicular to the street. I'm not moving anymore. So clearly something has happened. And so I'm realizing now that the truck is stuck in the mud, but I'm thinking, oh, it must not be that bad. So I do this trick where you can actually, when you look at a normal semi, there's the front wheels that turn, there's the second axle, and then there's a third one, and that's basically the front half of the truck. Well, only the second axle actually is what we call the drive axle. So those wheels are the things that are trying to pull you. But we have a little switch where you can engage the other set too. So now you have all 8 of the tractor wheels pulling. And so I flip that switch. That's the first thing you do. And nothing happens. The wheels are they're just spinning like crazy. And so I'm like, oh gosh. So I get out of the truck and I'm standing next to it now and I'm looking down the driver's side and I look back and the trailer is totally sunk into the mud, like down to almost to the underside of the trailer. Like just the wheels are half buried. Like this thing is in there, like quicksand, is gone. And the front half of the truck isn't quite as bad, but it's still pretty bad. The trailer now is acting like a big boat anchor. And so the front half of the truck just can't get enough traction to pull it out. So I'm like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? Oh wait, okay, hang on. I've totally set that up wrong. I just realized in my head, I flipped this thing around. I was nose in to the driveway. That was the plan. Okay, see, this is a good thing I'm telling the story because now I can remember it. So I was going to drive into the driveway, back out of it, and then go down the road. So at this point, right, gosh, what a dork. Okay, this is okay, in my defense, this is like 15 years ago, okay? So I was nosed into the driveway. The front wheels of the truck were sunk in. The back wheels of the trailer were also sunk in, and all 8 of the drive wheels are spinning like this. So I'm nose into the driveway. The back of the trailer is pointing back across the street. Now I'm standing outside of the truck, very frustrated and confused, trying to figure out what to do. So my my inner problem solver starts to take effect at this point, and I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, how I'm in the middle of Napa. How do you get a truck like this out of the mud? Like, what do you do? So I start looking around, and I'm figuring, okay, I'm just going to grab whatever I can find, sticks, rocks, and whatever. I'll start shoving stuff under the tires and see if, I can get some traction on whatever that is. So I start looking around. I grab rocks that I can find. I grabbed a couple boards, and I would shove them under the tires and then jump back in the truck and try to start driving it, trying to back out of the spot that I was in. And it was not happening. Nothing was moving. And I did the first very dumb thing, if that's not dumb enough. I leave the truck in gear, so that all 8 of the drive wheels are now, spinning freely in reverse. And I got out of the truck while the back wheels are spinning. Gosh, why did I do this? And at that point, so then I start trying to shove things under the tires, while I'm standing outside of the truck. Wheels are spinning, and I'm putting things under the wheels, trying to get the truck to move. I guess I figured if it worked, that it wouldn't be going really fast because it's only in first gear, and trucks only go like 1 mile an hour in first gear, and I would just jump into it really fast. I don't know. That's probably crazy to admit that I even did that. That's so stupid, but I did that. Luckily, or unluckily, the truck did not budge. Didn't move an inch, and everything I would put under the tires, it would just spit out the other side. It was like a softball pitching machine. It's crazy. So I'm looking, okay, what is like DEFCON level 2 to get this truck out of the mud? And I'm looking at the clock now. I'm late to the delivery, and I'm just like, oh gosh, like this is getting worse. I need to get out of here, like right now. And at that point, the property owner comes cruising down the road, and he pulls up, and he's looking at me. He's looking at the truck. He takes out his camera, and he opens his mouth, and he starts talking to me like, what are you doing? You're ruining my driveway. You're stuck in my mud. Someone's got to come back here and fix these tire ruts down the side. He's taking pictures of the truck, which had a big phone number on the side of it. He says, I'm going to call your boss. Like, what are you doing out here? Like, he was very, okay, understandably so. There's a 80-foot long truck stuck in the mud in this guy, basically in this guy's front yard. And so he takes the phone number down, and I try to be as cordial as possible and apologetic, because I am under no illusion that this is okay. I agree with you, sir. This is dumb. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't even be here. I passed the thing. I was trying to turn around, but it didn't work. I don't know. He didn't want to hear it anyway. So there's interaction number 1. And okay, so now he drives off, and I'm standing, and I'm like, oh gosh, I need to get out of here now. Like, Lord, please let me get out of here. And so I'm looking at the truck, and I'm thinking, okay, this truck is so heavy that it's sinking into the mud. I'm not going to get it out of here, so I got to lighten this thing up. So the back of the truck kind of converts into a ramp, So I put the ramp down and I unload the machinery from the truck, which is a process. This takes like 20 or 30 minutes to empty this truck and put the tail back up. So now I'm thinking like, okay, now this truck is going to be probably maybe 25,000 pounds lighter with all this machinery off of the truck. So maybe it'll move now. And so, okay, so I jump back in the cab, I put the truck in reverse, and I'm trying to back into the street again. And it would not move. All 8 cab wheels are just spinning in the mud, and the trailer is just sitting there. It's not moving. Like, this is just not happening. So there's DEFCON level 2. No effect. So I'm thinking, okay, what else do I got? Like, there's got to be something I can do. So I'm thinking, well, hey, wait a second. I've got this giant forklift right here. Why don't I try to like move the truck with that? Okay. So I grab some chains and I bring the forklift around and I basically back the forklift up right to the back end of the trailer. So that the forklift now is facing toward the street that I came from. And I back up to the trailer and I took a chain and I go from the back end of the forklift to the very back of the trailer. And now I'm going to try to pull the truck out backwards with it. And so I put the truck in neutral, not in drive or reverse, and I start pulling on the thing, and I give it a tug, and that didn't work. So there's another redneck solution to the problem was where if you can't just pull it out right, you back up a little bit, let the chain kind of slack, and then you gas it, and you just shock the heck out of it and try to yank it out that way. And I did that, just bang, 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 did not move, nothing. So now I'm thinking, okay, what if? Now this is full-blown idiot move right here. So I go to the truck, I put it in reverse, and I let the clutch out. And okay, so now the wheels are spinning. I once again get out of the truck, and I walk to the back of the truck now, and I get in the forklift. So the truck is in gear, the wheels are spinning, and I am 50 feet away from the steering wheel, basically, sitting in this forklift. And I'm going to try to pull the truck backwards, basically towards myself. At this, I don't know what I was thinking, because what if it worked? Now I'm sitting in a forklift behind a truck that's in gear, that's coming toward me, and I don't know what would have happened. It's unbelievable. So thank God I tried this, and I pulled and I pulled and I pulled, and it didn't move. I'm so lucky it didn't move, because this could have been so much worse. But now I'm like, gosh, what am I going to do? Like, I can't, like, this forklift is strong and it's not moving this truck. So I look at the truck and I turn my little idea factory on. And so these trucks, they have a very powerful winch mounted to the trailer. And what the winch is designed to do is to pull machinery that's broken onto the trailer. So you park the machine, or you try to get the machine right behind the truck. You hook this big cable up to it, and it'll actually drag, most machinery onto the trailer. It's really strong. So I'm thinking, okay, well, why can't I use that same winch to actually pull the whole truck backwards instead of pulling a machine onto it? Seems reasonable to me. So I release the winch and I pull the cable out as far as it'll go. But the thing is that I have to pull the truck backwards, but there's just a street behind me, so there's nothing I can hook the cable onto. So I see a tree that's back across the street, and I decide, hey, you know what? I got a bunch of chain. Like, I'm going to link all these chains together, hook it to the winch cable, and I'll wrap the chain around that tree that's like 70, 80 feet behind the truck, and I'll try to winch the truck backwards. That'll be great. And so I string this whole thing up, and now this has turned into some kind of mad science project is what it is. So I've got the truck, and I got the chains. I had to climb like through this barbed wire fence and wrap it around this tree, and then Now I'm standing in the street and I'm like, all right, here we go. So I get the little winch remote and I start tightening the winch up, tighten it up. And I see things like start to get strained, and you hear that like when metal's under pressure, you hear it like making that noise, and all of a sudden, boing! One of the chains breaks, and it goes flipping around that tree, all tangled up in this barbed wire fence, and like, oh my gosh! So I was like, okay, that didn't quite work. I broke the chain instead of pulling the truck backwards. Luckily, this time I didn't decide to try the whole like leave it in gear thing. I think by then I'd thought better of it. I wish I'd thought of that before. So then now I get another chain, and I'm thinking, how on earth am I going to get this truck out of here? Like, that winch is so strong. How is it not pulling the truck out? So I'm thinking, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run the winch cable back around that tree. I'll get a new chain. And then I'm going to get the forklift, and I'm going to pull the truck with the forklift while I'm using the winch cable. That's what I'm going to do. And so I string it up again, and I get it nice and tight. And I got it to the point a little bit before where it snapped last time. So I'm trying to, kind of make sure that it doesn't just break again. So I get it tight, and then I was walking back over to where I parked the forklift, just not too far away. And keep in mind now, if you're visualizing this scenario in your head, the truck is parked nose in, so forward into the driveway. The back of the truck is facing the street, and this winch cable is running across the street to a tree. And if you can visualize this, the winch cable is not very low on the vehicle. If you're standing next to the truck, the winch is probably at it's my shoulder level. It's probably 5 feet, maybe about that off the ground. And I ran the cable as level as I could. So if you're putting this together, there's a winch cable, which is maybe about as thick as your finger, and it's running at 5 feet off the ground across the street. No cones, no warning, no flashing lights, no one directing traffic, nobody to tell the Jeep Grand Cherokee that's driving down the street that there is a cable across the street. And as I'm walking towards the forklift, and I'm not thinking about it, I hear the car coming down the road, and it suddenly hits me, and I'm like, wait a second, they're not going to see that cable, they're not going to know what's going on. So I turn around and I start running back towards the truck, waving my arms in the air, trying to get the driver's attention, and just screaming at him, stop, 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 waving my hands. And he's not even slowing down. And this guy, probably maybe at about 25, maybe 30 miles an hour, he runs into this cable. And it looked like those videos you see of like an F-18 when they land on an aircraft carrier, and that tail hooks the cable, and it slows them down super fast. It was exactly that. He hit that cable. The cable did not snap, but his windshield did, and it got caught basically at the roof line, and it acted like that, like it just stopped him dead in his tracks. Bam! And it like sprung, like he went, he hit the cable, and it sprung him backwards. Like it actually threw the whole SUV like a few feet backwards. And at that point, all I could do, I grabbed my face, and I crouched down. I didn't even want to see it. I was just like, no, oh my gosh, no, I can't believe that just happened. Oh gosh. And man, I could not believe it. I walked over there. I let the I let the cable down, and I just walked over to the guy. I was just mortified. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I was just, luckily he wasn't hurt. Like, it didn't take his head off. I couldn't imagine, oh my gosh, if it was like a motorcycle or something like that, it would have killed somebody. Luckily, he was fine. He was a little frazzled. Obviously, it was a shock to him, and no one's expecting that to happen. He was also a little upset, understandably so. I was also upset with me. And we exchanged information. We took pictures of everything. We had to stay there for a little while. And, gave him my boss's phone number. So now this is the second person who's going to be calling my boss later and telling him about this. And after a little while, he ended up going on his way. And I was just like, I was on the edge of tears right now. Because this is, like, I'm a new truck driver, man. And I can't believe what's happening. And so I'm still here now with, the 2 generators, with this forklift, with a truck that's still stuck in the mud, and a winch cable that's across the road that had just finished almost decapitating somebody. But I still had to get out of there. I wasn't done yet. And I continued on with the plan. So I restrung the winch cable. And you know what? Darn it, I don't think I put a cone out again after that. This is not my brightest moment, okay? For all authenticity here on the Great Stories podcast, this is not the best that I've got to offer. I don't even know why I'm telling everybody this. It doesn't make me look good, but we've already started, so let's finish it. So I restring the winch cable back up, and I get in the forklift, and I put the chain on the forklift. And so I've got the remote, and I've got the forklift, I got everything, and I do the winch and the forklift at the same time. And thank you, Lord, that truck started to move, and I drug it as far as I could. And fully out of the mud. But even when it was out of the mud, I noticed, gosh, this is really, like, it should be rolling easier, right? It's in neutral. Anyway, so finally I get the truck back on there, and I put the tail down. I put the generators back on there. I chain those down. I put the forklift back on there. I chain that down. I put the tail up. So now this is like 2.5 hours later. Finally, now the truck is free of the mud. I'm back on the street. But here's the thing that I think is the worst part of this whole thing, and which I can't believe happened. But there's a bad habit that a lot of truckers get into. And that is there's 2 sets of brakes. There's a set of brakes for the front half of the truck, and there's a set of brakes for the back half of the truck. And what a lot of truckers will do is, just out of laziness or something like that, you'll just pull the brakes for the trailer part of the truck and basically kind of use that as a quasi parking brake. They tell you not to do that, but I'm pretty sure, anyone who drives a truck could say, like, yeah, sometimes you pull one or the other, right? And so the first time that I got out of the truck, I actually did that, and I pulled the brakes for the trailer part. And I never disengaged them for that entire story. So all the way from the beginning, while I'm trying to shove things under the tires, while I'm leaving it in drive and getting out of the truck, the first time I tried to pull it with the forklift, the first time I tried to winch it backwards, for that whole time, this entire gigantic steel trailer, which on its own weighs, something like 17,000 pounds. This thing is sitting there like a boat anchor. I probably wouldn't have been able to move it even on dry ground. Forget the mud. The mud was a non-factor. The entire time I was fighting against the braking system of the truck itself. And it would have worked right away, honestly, if I hadn't done that. And lessons learned. So I load the truck back up, and I finally get to where I'm supposed to be going, which is only a mile away from where all this happened. and empty the loads very carefully, and then I call my boss. And fella's name was Mike. Gosh, I forget his last name. Mike from All American Rentals. If you listen to this, man, you have to remember this story, at least parts of it, because this is ridiculous. So Mike says to me, so I call him up, and I told him, I said, Mike, man, I think you're going to have to fire me. That's what I opened the conversation with. And he says, what happened? So I just kind of gave him the Reader's Digest version, the highlights, the lowlights, and I said, man, I understand. And you know what? He was actually super cool about it. Like he said, man, I think he said, yeah, I guess we're still trying to get that new trucker stink off of you, huh? It's like, I guess you could call it that. Yeah, that stinks a little bit. But he knew I was a rookie, and machinery hauling is hard, and I didn't know what I was doing, and so he was super forgiving about it. And he actually did not fire me for that. He told me, take a day off, chill out, relax a little bit, get your head on straight, come back to work, and we'll talk about it. And yeah, so that's what I did. And I did end up getting fired from that job maybe like 2 weeks later. Because I was just, man, I was such a rookie. I was in a different place. That was in a rough spot just emotionally for me. And I was just making all kinds of mistakes. I delivered a machine to the wrong zip code. A couple weeks later, I ran over a parking meter in Oakland with a backhoe. It was just all bad. I shouldn't have been doing that job. I was only 20. I think I was 21 or 22. I was 22 at the time. And I was so new to trucking. I should have got another job first. I think that's most companies that do machinery don't hire guys that young to move machinery. Anyhow, so there was a good gap between when I did that and then when I started working for Sun State again. Of course, I never told my current employer about that incident when I got hired there. But I made some errors working for Sun State as well, but nothing on that level for sure. I think I kind of honed my skills, and in the last 6 years, I think I've become pretty proficient at moving machinery. Although, well, okay, really quick, a couple incidents at Sun State that they know about that I think are worth sharing. One time I had a water truck on my truck, and I was in the yard and I was unloading it, and I had gotten in a conversation. I was talking to somebody, and I forgot to put the ramp down on the back of the truck. And the bed of the truck is probably 3 feet off the ground. It's not crazy high, but you're definitely supposed to lower the ramp before you unload the piece of machinery. And so I unchained the water truck, and I got in it, and I started backing it up, and then all of a sudden, just like bam, 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 like it was really abrupt. And I was like, gosh, that was a lot rougher than I think it should have been. And I looked down, and the front wheels of the water truck are on the trailer in front of me, and the back wheels are on the ground. And there's no ramp. I just drove right off the back of the truck. Luckily, the turnover at Sun State is pretty quick, so there's only a handful of guys that would even remember that happened. Even my current boss doesn't know that, which is great, because they all think I'm awesome. Like, oh, he's never made any mistakes. No, I made them before they got there. There was another time I had a machine just come off the truck while I was in it, but that was a mechanical failure. It wasn't actually my fault, but it was scary, because these pieces of machinery are all huge, and they're all heavy. And they will, they'll kill a person without even slowing down. They don't even think about it. They don't have any feelings or anything. They just do it. And so there's that. But I did that for Sun State. I worked full-time there for about 3.5 years or so. And I I still work there, actually. I work there maybe on a busy week, I'll do 3 days. Most weeks, I'll work there maybe 2 days a week. And I do that just because, living in the Bay Area, being single, having bills, having some leftover debts from, when I had back surgery and all that. You need the extra cash. And so I go in there and I work a couple days a week. But the cool thing is that how that came about is an interesting story, because at one point I was working there full time, and that's, full time there means that you're working 5 days a week, and sometimes you're on call. So once in a while you work a full Saturday. So some weeks you're actually on for 6 full days, and that's hard. And it's exhausting. It's hard work. It's, you have to be mentally focused, and you're driving a semi in the Bay Area, and you're moving machines around, you're throwing chains around, and it's just a rough way to make a living. And I was feeling it, and I was just struggling because I'd felt like I'd been given some giftings from God, and I believe that He set me up to be a communicator of sorts and a teacher. And I'd found that I'd had some giftings and some success in teaching kids. And I had always thought that, gosh, if I could, if I could do my life again, or if I could go back, gosh, I wish I had gone to school, maybe some kind of seminary or something like that, and I could teach kids and all that. But, I just thought, man, it's too late for that. I'm in my late 20s. I got bills to pay. I can't go back to school. Like, this is just not an option for me to change the direction of my life and that kind of thing. And so I just kind of resigned to, like, okay, I guess this is it. Like, I'm just going to be a trucker. And it's not like that's a bad thing to be. Trucking, it's a great job. But I felt this calling within me. And I believe that if you're really called to something, you should be uncomfortable with what you're doing if it's not that. And I felt that heavy. Just, man, I want to do this. I want to teach the gospel. I want to teach kids. And I was doing it, in the cracks. I was leading a 3rd through 6th grade ministry called Awana at a local church over here called Newark Community Church. A little plug for them. And that was great. And I was also serving with the high school group at Resonate Church called Amplify, which is that's the second thing I'm going to talk about, is the camp. And but I felt like, gosh, I had more in me. Like, I wanted to do more, but I just did not have the time or the energy, really, to do more than I was already doing. And so I was just really uncomfortable with that. I was feeling discouraged. And when you feel that way, it's a great job. It's a great job. And to the guys, at Sun State or whatever who are listening, like, man, it's a noble profession. It's a hard job. You're earning a good wage for your family. Like, it's a profession. It's a highly skilled form of trucking. I will not take anything away from that, but I felt like my calling was somewhere else. But I had no idea how I would ever make that happen or how that could possibly be. And it just made me really uncomfortable, and it was very discouraged. And I was going through a time when I was just feeling just hopeless about it. I mean, anybody, I talked to my good friend about it. I talked to my niece about it. And just like, there's got to be more than this, is what I kept saying. There's got to be something more. There's got to be something more. I feel like God's calling me to something, but I don't know what. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's next. And my pastor at the time, Ryan Kwan, had shot me a message about, he was doing this backyard project in his yard, and his goal was to like transform his backyard into a place that could be used as like a hangout, as a meeting place that people could come over, ministries could have meetings there and dinners there and barbecues there and all these things. It was really cool. And so he invited me over, because I'm kind of useful for different things. And I guess he didn't mind having me around, which is great. But I had access to machinery, and he was trying to dig this big hole in his yard that it was going to be used for a pond, or like a koi pond, I think it was, or some kind of French drain, something like that. Yeah, that's what it was. He was going to put in a waterfall, and this was going to be like the French drain portion where the water goes into. Anyway, long story short, I brought a machine over. I dug a hole, ripped up a tree. It was a blast. But afterward, Ryan invited me out to lunch, and we went over to La Piñata on Thornton. And we got to talking, and he was, I don't know what he was thinking ahead of time, but he started just asking me about life direction stuff and all these kinds of things. And I just expressed this hunger that I had in me. Like I want to do more. I feel called to teach. I want to teach kids, but I just don't know. I don't know how I could. I don't know. I just expressed that frustration. That whole thing I just told you about. And he ended up inviting me to consider interning with the church. And I thought, interning? Really? Like, that's kind of... Like, I was like 31 at the time. I thought, I can't be an intern. What am I going to intern for? I'm not even in college. But he said, no. Internship is... it's you just kind of figuring out what your calling is. It's you get to come in and try different things and exercise your spiritual gifts and just see if ministry's for you. See if maybe like a drastic change in your life direction is supposed to happen. And at first I was like, oh yeah, that's okay. That's cute, pastor, right? But in the real world, like things like that just don't happen. And, but he said something to me. He said, you know what? If you want it, you'll figure it out. And he just kind of left it there. And this is the first of many of these kinds of conversations that I've had with him. And I know he tunes into the podcast sometimes. So Ryan, if you're listening, I can't even express the deep gratitude that I feel towards that man, because from that instance and many, 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 many more since then, like God has not used any single person's voice more dramatically in my life to speak into my soul, to just identify who I am and push me, to take hard looks in the mirror, to look at Christ hard. God has used your voice, Ryan, to literally change who I am. And I know that there are thousands of others potentially who could say the same thing. But in this case, he kind of challenged me to consider, like, okay, you say like you feel this calling. What are you going to do about it? And so I went home, and I just thought, like, okay, well, all right. So if I were to be an intern, right, it's not a lot of money. It'd be a huge time sacrifice, which I'm cool with. Like, that's what I'm hungry for. Let's go. But I still got to pay bills. I don't know what that's going to look like. But I said, okay, well, if I had my way of it, here's what I would do. And I thought, well, I would try to convince Sun State to let me work part-time, and so that I could intern for this year, as the rest of the time. And I thought, like, gosh, how cool would that be? Like, if I could just take a year out of my life and just devote that to service, even if it's just for a year. Like, how cool is that? The year that I was 31 was the year that I got to take the leash off and just go serve Christ with everything that I had. Like, just pour everything out. I was like, that's a neat dream. And the next day, I was kind of like, okay, well, why don't let me just, okay, whatever. Like, Lord, if you want this to happen, like, you're pretty good at, like, figuring out the details for these kinds of things. So I sent an email to my boss at Sun State at the time. His name was Josh. And to my knowledge, Josh wasn't a believer, right? He's not a Christ follower or anything like that. And what I just basically said was, hey, Josh, like I have this opportunity. And it was hard to explain, like intern. It's not really internship. So what the way I explained it is that it's basically a local missionary, because I'm going to be on mission for a year locally. So it's basically a local mission trip. That's the best way I could explain it to someone who doesn't, grasp these concepts or whatever without going into this big theological thing. And I told them, so it's a year-long thing. It's working for the church. It's basically full-time. And, in the meantime, what I'd like to do is work part-time trucking. And after a year, I would come back full-time. And the internship is over, and like it never happened. And I just sent that off to him, just thinking, like, there's no way. Like, what am I doing? And, my employer is not known for going out of their way to accommodate, their average blue-collar employee with these kinds of things. People get fired all the time. Like, it's just not, it's a construction business. It's not known for compassionate, touchy-feely type stuff. And I thought, there's no way, they're just going to laugh at this. And so the next day I was over at Sun State, and I walked into the branch, and there's a guy standing there, and he's a taller guy, and he's bald, maybe like 50 years old or so. And for some reason, every corporate guy at that company looks just like that. They're all tall, bald, and 50. So I just assume that every time I see a bald guy, oh, he must be, a bigwig. And this guy, he turns around and he sees me, and he reads the name on my shirt, and he says, "Oh, hey, are you Ryan?" I was like, uh-oh, what happened? And I go, yeah, well, I knew, and what I said to him was, that depends. What did I do? And he says, no, your boss forwarded me an email that you sent him yesterday. And I read that, and he said, I think that's a pretty cool thing, what you're trying to jump in and do there. And well, my name is Jeff. I think Jeff was his name. Gosh, I should know that. But he said, yeah, so I'm actually the operations manager for the Western United States. And he's basically the second in command below the owner himself. And, he's in charge of, I think, like something like 5,000 employees or something like that. And he just said, I think this is something we want to accommodate. I like it. And go ahead and tell your bosses to do like whatever needs to happen for you to be able to do this. Scheduling wise, work out a schedule. Whatever's got to go down for you to be able to do this. Let's go ahead and do that. I was just like, what? I didn't know if this guy was a Christian or whatever. I just met him. I've never seen him since, actually. This is the only time I ever met this guy, was this conversation. And like, there it is. Okay. So we're going to be, so that, but then it got real, and I was like, oh my gosh, am I actually going to do this? Like, it was an impossibility the previous day. And he said, Lord, if you want it to happen, you're going to make it happen. I sent the email, and then bam. So I got the phone out, and I texted Ryan, and I said, hey man, I wish I can go back and read the actual text, but I just said, well, it doesn't look like I need much time to think about it. I'm in. Let's do it. And at that point, I became an intern at Resonate Church, and I was with actually the Amplify group, the high school group. And there's a lot in there, but I spent a year, essentially just dumping myself out. I did everything. I showed up to everything. I was all over it. It was so cool. Just to be able to finally just unleash it and just show, I just did everything I could. I planned that giant Easter egg extravaganza party that we did, that mess. And showed up to every AMP event, every event, everything I could get my hands on. I just dove in. It was so fun, so fun. But then towards the end of the year, the internship was up, and the promise that I'd made to Sun State was that after a year that I was going to come back and I'd be full time, and that was part of the deal. And I was just really kind of grieving that, because I was enjoying greatly what I was doing. And at that point, I'd actually had the opportunity to preach in front of the church, and I guess it went okay. I'm not going to say I'm the best preacher in the world, but just something felt right about it. It just felt right to be teaching. And I wanted to learn more about how to do that and how to be in ministry. And so I had a little conversation with God. I think I took a little retreat by myself up to the snow. Or no, it wasn't snowing then. When was it? It was during the summer. I just went up to the mountains. I had a few conversations with God about it, and I came to the same spot where I was like, man, you know what? God, you're really good at figuring out the details for these kinds of things. What's next? Like, you want me to serve? You want me to keep going? Do you want me to stop? Like, to go back to trucking? And I just told him, like, gosh, Lord, okay, like, whatever you wanted me to do, I'm just going to do that. I said, just make it clear. Tell me what to do. I'll just do that. Just don't make me figure it out. So I got back in town, and Jackson Purdue, who was our family pastor at the time, he called me and he said, hey, can you have a meeting? And then him and the children's ministry director had a meeting with me, and they offered me a full-time position with the church as the director of the grade school ministry. And I just thought that was so cool. Like, yeah, this is what I feel like I'm built for. Like, this is my sweet spot. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Yes, I want to do it. But there was a problem. As you could imagine, children's ministry isn't a financially lucrative venture, right? And like I said, I'm single. I live in the Bay Area, and it can be tricky. I live on my own, and it's expensive. And I did the math on it, and I would be not just living check to check, but penny to penny. There'd be no money left over for a pair of socks if I needed that, or if a car broke down, I just wouldn't be able to do it. And I said, gosh, I just don't know that I can do it. Like, I'm still going to have to work some. I can't just quit the trucking job. And that was, oh gosh, that was just so hard, because I wanted to do this so badly. And I said, but I have to figure this piece out. But it struck me like, okay, well, God did an amazing thing before. And so I'll send another email. And this time it was so bold. I can't believe I said this, but I sent him an email, and I just basically told him, like, hey, the whole year thing, not really. I actually want to make it permanent. And as much as I'm working now, I actually want to work less than that. So maybe like 2 days a week, maybe 1 day a week, maybe some weeks not at all. Basically, I just want to call you guys and tell you when I can come in. And I shot the email off to him, and we had a meeting the next day, and they say to me, well, we read this email here, and he says, yeah, we don't see any reason why this can't work. I'm just like, what? Are you crazy? You gotta be kidding me. Like, I just felt like God was smiling right then. Like, this is ridiculous. And so, I currently am the only employee of Sun State Equipment out of about 5,000 people that makes up his own hours, that calls them and tells them, yeah, I can work this week. Yeah, I'll work Friday, not Saturday, but I'll come in Monday. And it's ridiculous. And the funny thing is that, like, if I see them on a Monday, they'll thank me. They'll say, hey, Ryan, thanks for your help on the weekend. I'm like, you're thanking me? I'm totally abusing you guys. But hey, you're welcome. And that's just how it's been. And so 6 years I've been in that truck, and it's such a huge blessing. And, life is still tight, man. I just did my taxes today, and I owe the state $1,000 somehow. I don't know how that happened. I'm going to look into that. But it's still tricky, just living on my own, being a single guy, living in the Bay. Like, life is tight. It's tight. But honestly, that trucking job that God has provided for me has, doing that 1, 2, sometimes 0 days a week has enabled me to do what I do now. And it's a huge blessing, and it's a crazy story of his provision, because it's an impossible thing. It should not happen. It shouldn't be this way, but it is. That's because he wants it. He wants me where I'm at. And that leads me to the second part of what I want to talk about tonight, and that is the High School Amplify Winter Camp 2019. And that's another one of those cases where the camp goes from a Friday after school, or it's actually just a little bit before school gets out, all the way through Monday evening. And those are typically trucking days for me, but it's as simple as calling them on like Wednesday and saying, hey, this weekend, I can't come in at all. I'm out of the state. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Sorry. And they're like, okay, cool. See you next week. It's ridiculous. Totally abusing them, but thank you, Lord. And so I love going on these camps. I love going on these high school camps. See, I serve in the ministry, in the Amplify ministry with our youth pastor, Chase McVean, every Tuesday night. And it's rare that I'll miss a Tuesday night. I love coming to these things. But the truth is that Tuesdays, in a lot of ways, for the weekly meeting as far as high school ministry goes, in a lot of ways is just kind of like maintenance. It's the way I look at it. Because the meeting is only an hour and a half or 2 hours long, and you talk to the kids, you get to know them a little bit, you kind of check in with them. But it's really hard to go really deep and do like substantial conversation with kids on a Tuesday night, because there's not a lot of time. There's a lot of them. It's hard to get around to all of them. It's hard to have those conversations. It's hard to just get people comfortable enough to, get out of their heads about, oh, I got homework when I get home. Oh, I was late because I had this swim practice or this football thing, all these different things they got going on. It's a very hectic time. Not all of them come every week. Every week there's a handful missing for whatever reason. And so it's just hard to cover a lot of really significant ground on Tuesdays. I feel like it's, in a lot of ways, it's kind of maintenance in a lot of ways. Not completely. You get what I'm saying, though. It's hard to cover a lot of ground consistently, and so I think in a lot of the cases we look toward these camps as these sort of concentrated doses of real like Christian community and connection, brotherhood, discipleship, all these things. And we always find that the kids make some of their most significant personal decisions and some of their most dramatic growth spiritually at camps like this. Because if you think about it, if we have 2 hours at AMP, and assuming they come every single week, we meet probably somewhere around 50 weeks out of the year. We'll miss, a few here and there, 50 something. Maybe like 45, I don't know, something like that. 2 hours a night, you do the math on that, you're only looking at maybe a total, assuming they come to everything, you're only looking at about 80 hours, maybe 90 hours, maybe 100 hours that these kids spend. But they're not contiguous, connected hours. They're broken up by 6.5 something days in between. So really, these camps are an amazing contrast to that, because from 1:30 in the afternoon on Friday all the way till Monday night, we're together. And you can build incredible connection in that amount of time. And you just see kids grow in amazing ways. And by the end of that trip, you would think that they are literally related in a lot of ways. Like they're as close as could be. And so for the kids that are able to come to winter camp and to summer camp and on the mission trip and, to the various events that happen in between, they really, really grow very close together. And that's what I was looking forward to with this camp. And that's what we did. So the way we did this, we have a bus now. Resonate Church just bought a blue bus. And what a wonderful problem to have. We had too many people for one bus, so we actually had to still charter a second bus, which is crazy. Because we went from, I think, the first year that I went there was like 48, maybe 52 people. And this time we had 84 or 86, something like that. It's a crazy huge group. There was kids, I didn't even know who some of these kids are. Like, I never met them before. But they came. And so we split the group in half. Half of them went on the new AMP bus, and half of them went on the cushy charter bus. The charter bus was way nicer. Like, really nice seats, really great. The AMP bus is more like a school bus with the benches, and it's not pretty. But it's a party. And it's super fun. So Chase and myself both have bus driving licenses, but he didn't want me driving for the whole trip. He wanted me to spend time with students, which is awesome. So he drove for the whole trip, and he did a fantastic job. But at this point there, 2 weeks ago, there was just massive storms that hit Tahoe, and so the day before we left, we're just checking the weather and like checking the road closures, and like we're just hearing about traffic jams coming out of our ears, just avalanches, and it just sounded like a survival situation up there. Like, oh my gosh, is Tahoe going to exist by the time we get up there? And so we had just contingency plan after contingency plan, and we departed Fremont promptly at 1:30 in the afternoon on Friday, and got in the bus and started cruising out there. And it was actually a pretty easy ride for the most part. The traffic wasn't that bad, and the kids did well. You know how they are. They get some music on and they start yelling and hooping and hollering and dancing around and having conversations, playing Mafia. It was great. But as we're getting closer to the mountains, we're realizing, gosh, they're talking about a lot of the roads being closed. And there's two ways to get to Tahoe from here. You go Highway 50, which takes you to South Shore Tahoe, or you go Highway 80, which is a longer route because it takes you around the north side of the lake. And so we wanted to go Highway 50 because it's a little bit more direct. But by the time we got to about Placerville and we stopped for dinner, we're just saying, like, the roads are technically open, but nobody's moving. Like, somebody we knew was in the traffic jam, and they're like, we haven't moved in 2 hours. We're not going anywhere. And so our entire camp made an executive decision. And this is 4 churches all come together for this one camp. And, total maybe 200 students or so. And so one of the churches was Church of the Foothills, which is, in the foothills, getting closer to Tahoe. And what they had offered was like, okay, if the roads are that bad, what we'll do is we'll host the first night of the camp with the speakers and the small groups and the breakouts and the music, everything. We'll just host it at our church for that night. We can stay the night at the church and then finish the drive in the morning as the highway's clear and the storm kind of passes. They're like, hey, great plan. So we did exactly that. We stopped at Church of the Foothills, and it was great. They had, the stage was set up, our speakers were there, the band was there, and you would think that this is where we were doing the camp, and it was actually pretty well done. I got to give mad kudos to Church of the Foothills for putting that together. It was great. And we did our music, we did our first talk, and we did our small groups. And something I like to do when we go on these camps is I'll get my small group together. This is the group of guys that I have every week. There's if all of them show up, there's like 8 of them, but it seems like there's always 6 or so. And we got them together, and I just kind of cast a vision over the camp. And of course, just being in a strange spot, we didn't make it all the way to Tahoe. A lot of their expectations were just being kind of challenged, and it was actually a really fruitful time of conversation because we were able to dig into them a little bit about, so why do you come to these camps? Do you see this as just a fun vacation with your friends? Or do you see this as an opportunity to grow closer to your Savior and to your brothers and sisters? Because we can do that anywhere. And we're going to start doing it now. We're not going to wait till tomorrow, for camp to start, right? Air quotes. We're going to do it now. And I'm so proud of those guys because they took it, and they took it seriously. And yeah, they were like, man, like I wanted to get to, of course, yeah, we can grieve that. Sure, this isn't the situation that we thought we were going to be in, but let's make the most of it. We're here, right? We're together. And darn it, they did. It was great. So we had our first session, right? And the talks were done by these two guys, and that they're sort of a sketch comedy speaker combo group of two, and they call themselves Far From Ordinary, FFO. These guys are fantastic. So they come out and they put on little skits with each other where they take on different roles, and they just kind of work out they basically like modernized parables, right? And then they come out of character and they do the teaching. They open scripture and they talk to the kids about, they basically do a little sermon, and then they'll interrupt the sermon with another little sketch bit. So well done. Just very, very good. And they spent the whole weekend doing these, twice a day. Once on Friday, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday. They lead the kids through these talks, and the whole weekend was really good. The theme of the camp was called All In. And what we were trying to do was work through with the kids, like what does it really look like for us to be all in for Christ? Like, starting with, why would we want to be all in with Christ? Well, because he's actually all in with us. Remember? Like, he left heaven, came to the earth as a baby, gave up all this like heavenly power and authority and glory and all these things to be a baby. And he came to an earth that he knew was going to kill him. Like, that's pretty stinking all in, really. And that kind of love, that kind of God, following a God like that, as we become more like him, as we immerse ourselves in who he is, he's going to change us too. And it's going to look more like we're all in. And so we spent the whole weekend just kind of going through that and challenging the guys, like, do we really believe this? Like, what would it look like if I really believed that I'm heaven bound, that I'm loved by a God like this? Like, what does that look like in my life? Where does my life not look like that, and why? In what ways am I kind of not really all in? Like, why is that? Is it because I doubt? Is it because I don't really trust that God has the best in mind for me? Like, what is it? And it was so fruitful, because after the talks, we go through the small group times and we just discuss these things, and it sparked off some very, very heartfelt, some very deep, just really introspective thought for, I think, most of the kids there. My guys in particular, all of them, just started talking about just different idols in their life, different things that they prioritize over, their relationship with Christ, the ways that they doubt, the way that they hold back, the things that they keep to themselves, the ways that they're still selfish and short-sighted. I mean, these are sophomores in high school, for God's sake, and they're considering these things legit. So proud, and I those of you who might be a parent of one of the guys in my group, you know who you are. Like, you'd be so proud of just that deep thought that your sons went through for that trip, and even your daughters too. I'll talk a little bit about that, but something that we did every night. Well, the first night we were there, I led the guys to do like this storyboarding. It's something we did as a church staff that they really dug too, and that's where they draw pictures of their life, and it's like, draw a picture of what your relationship with your creator has been over the last year. Draw a picture representing your relationship with your family. Draw one of what you're hopeful for over the next year. Draw your highlights, your lowlights. And then so each session we went through a couple guys, and they got to fill everybody in on what's been going on in the last year, and how's this relationship, how's that relationship. And there's a thing in Christian circles where, when you're talking about, confession and testimony stuff, people can get pretty comfortable going to that like 70% vulnerable mark, where, I'll tell you my struggles, but I won't get specific, and I'll hold back this and that and this, these darker things. And then once you get a little closer, there's like the 80% mark, and then there's the 90% mark, and then there's like that red zone where nobody gets in there. That 95%, like dirty laundry, like here it is, here's my inner thoughts. Like, this is what makes me ugly. These are the things that make me question how God could love me, like that kind of stuff. And I have to tell you that with this group of sophomores, we're in that zone, man. They're bearing it. They're telling each other things that they're obviously in that zone. And that they believe that each other are for each other. They believe each other loves each other. And they confess these things. And it makes me so proud and humbled. And it's so powerful because they don't have these dark spots. They're shining light into each other's lives with each other. And these kind of shameful, dark things that we keep in the corners of our lives don't have control over them anymore. They're free of them together. And they hold each other accountable. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And this is in the midst of giggling about fart jokes and just like it's so crazy. Like they display these just epic moments of spiritual maturity. It's just that I wish like the adult, like grown up missional community small groups that we have at our church, I wish that they could reach this level of vulnerability. It's crazy. And then 5 minutes later, they fall apart giggling because someone like made a fart in the back of the It's ridiculous. But in any case, I'm so proud of them. And we finally did get up to Tahoe, by the way. The next morning, the roads looked like they're cleared up enough. We ended up taking Highway 80, which is the long way around, but it was gorgeous, gorgeous road. It snowed a lot of the times. I should tell you this. So the nice charter bus has a bathroom on it, whereas the Amplify bus does not. And when you're in a bus for 6 hours, sometimes you got to go. And we were at a stretch, we're off in the Sierras. Like, there's nothing out there for a long way. And we had to go. So we strategized about it. And we're like, okay, well, the guys are simple. So we'll start with that. We pull over. And we just tell all the guys, like, hey, guys, we're peeing. So everyone find your own spot. Keep your eyes forward. And you'll write your name in the snow. It's great. And we all did that. It was fun. One of the kids said, this is kind of fun. It's like, when you see a lightsaber cut through a steel door. Like, that's kind of what I'm doing right now with this snow. The girls' part was a lot more complicated. They had to make like this makeshift like tent thing out of sleeping bags so they could have a little privacy and do their business over there. It was kind of fun. A lot of them were scared of it, but it seemed like, our students are so game for stuff like that. It's ridiculous. None of them are like Madonna, little divas or anything. They're super cool. So that was fun. But we ended up getting up there. We got settled in, and it was so fun. The snow was everywhere. It snowed almost the whole time we were there. It was an endless snowball fight. People making snowmen, sledding down hills. Oh gosh, it's so fun. So fun. But in the midst of that, we're just these really, really deep, epic conversations. And, at one point, I was walking through one of the little areas there, and I saw one of our high school girls kind of sitting almost by herself in one of the rooms there in like this worship room. And I took a look at her, and it's like, oh gosh, her eyes look like, like you could tell when someone's been crying, and she just looks kind of sad. And I was like, oh no, like what? That makes me so sad. Like, why are you crying? And as time went on, I know that group very well. We have this group of junior girls that's called the Chickleys. And they're just a delightful group of girls. I love them like they're my own kids. It's ridiculous. They're just, but I guess a theme had been coming up with them, as well as with my guys too. And as it turns out, with a lot of the students that were actually at the camp, there was this, and I think as they were being pushed to really consider this all-in thing, they were confronted in a lot of ways with their own unbelief. And it shook them deeply. And I know that can sound really scary for, like, if you're a parent of one of these kids, or even their leader, from our perspective, they're talking about, gosh, do I really believe this? Like, do I think God is real? Like, why don't I want to go all in? Why do I have these doubts? Why do I put all these things in front of my faith? Why? And they start to doubt, and it became a very legitimate, real struggle of a weekend for a lot of our students, my guys, and for these girls, and for a good handful of other ones throughout the weekend. And it just, gosh, while on one hand it was, it's troubling, because you're like, gosh, like, they're struggling. This isn't a happy-go-lucky, feel-good kind of trip for them. This has been hard. They're not going to have that, like, mountaintop high, yay, everything's great after camp kind of feeling. Like, they're doing real work here. But this is real, mature struggle. And I think we all go through these ebbs and flows with our faith, where sometimes we feel it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes, man, you'll be feeling so good. Gosh, someone plucks a string on a guitar and you start crying. Yeah, I love you, God. Woo! Where you just feel so connected to God. You could just see him. You could feel him everywhere. You just want to follow him, everything. And then other times you're just like, gosh, are you even there? Are you even real? And you wonder, if those times go on long enough, you just wonder, like, was it real before? Like, was I just being emotional and fanciful? And I don't know, is this even where I'm supposed to be at? And I think for a lot of them, this was one of the first times they went through one of those little valleys. And I know it's been a couple of weeks, but there's a handful of them that are kind of still in that spot. And as much as I would just love to wave a magic wand or say the right words to get them out of it, I think it's good for them to be in that struggle. I think it's really, really important for our young people to really consider, why do I believe what I believe? Is this faith really mine? Why am I here? Because a lot of them don't do that. They grow up in the church or whatever, and they show up to church on Sundays, and they do all the church stuff just because that's what they've always done. It's like they're hereditary Christians, and that's not the case. Like, everyone has to come to a spot where they're going to own this thing or not, and they're going to go all in or not. And this trip really challenged them to consider that. And I'm so glad that it did, because this is a glorious struggle that they're in right now. And it was a true privilege to just play a role, to be there as part of that for them. And there was one day in particular where this Chickley's group and mine, I just felt like the trip was so busy. It was so hectic. It was tricky getting up there. And so, myself and Annie Tay and Sharon Peng, who's the leader for these girls, we just said, like, hey, let's, that we're going to do these breakout sessions, and there was all these activities planned for the afternoon, and them two and I got together and just said, hey, why don't let's just kind of skip the afternoon activities, and let's take our groups out on like a little snow hike, and find a quiet spot and just let them be still for a little while. Because I found in my own walk with Christ that stillness can be hard to come by. We're so busy. There's always somewhere to go. There's always something to do. There's a load of laundry. I'm sitting in my house right now, and I'm looking at my shoes sitting over there. My shoes are disorganized. Darn it. I'm sitting next to a rolled up piece of carpet that I was going to put in. I got, there's a chair over there. Like, there's things to clean. Like, my dishes need to be done. Like, there's always something to do, and there's always these pressures around you. And that's just in my house. Like, let alone the projects I'm doing at church. Like, what I got to do tomorrow. My schedule for this, schedule for that. And these kids are the same. They're super busy. Gosh, they're all in college prep mode. Half of them are taking 4 AP classes. It drives me crazy. I don't know how they do it. They're on sports teams, and there's a lot of pressure on them. There's a lot of busyness, and I know that stillness is so hard to come by. And yet, for times like that, when you are in a real spiritual struggle and you're questioning things, like, you need to fight for that stillness. And so that's kind of, long story short, that's what we did. We took our kids out, and my group is 7 people. Theirs I think is 7 or 8. So it's not a tiny group, but we took them out, and went around and walking around in the snow and just playing, throwing snowballs and stuff. But then we found a cool spot down the road. It was really secluded, and we had a good view of the lake, and we just kind of sat them all down, and I just kind of walked them through a little exercise of reflection to consider what you believe and why you're here, and that God, it seems crazy to say this, sometimes, but sometimes just somebody telling you, hey, this is real. God is real. Like, I really believe that Christ was a guy. He came. He was the Son of God, and he died for you. That happened. That's a real thing. And it's okay to have doubts. It's not a shameful thing to have doubts. We all do. We're not all expected to understand this all the time. We're not expected to be the strongest people in the world. It's just pillars of the faith. Everybody has moments when they just don't feel it, where they just feel down or doubting or just, you go through these valleys. But these are good. This is a good time for you, because you are going to discover more of who you really are. And you're going to make decisions about who you really believe that Christ is. You're not going to take it for granted now. See, you're being exposed to your own faith. And the holes in it are only going to drive you to consider whether or not you believe in this God. And it brought up a scripture that this is the only thing I prepared for tonight, but it's in Matthew chapter 7. It starts at verse 7. And this is the words of Jesus. He says, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open for you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who will knock, it will be opened. Or which one of you, if a son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? And as much as I think this can be about tangible things, I think this is far more about spiritual sustenance than anything else. And I think that this is what we let our students to do, is just to take some time to be still, to be quiet, to ask God to meet you, to seek intimacy with him. Because I think at the core of it, we can, we don't produce our faith. It says faith is a gift from God. Salvation is a gift from God. Our life is a gift from God. The very air that we breathe, like God, everything that we have is provided by him. And so is our salvation. It's by grace that you've been saved, not by good works, so that no one can boast. That's what Scripture says. It's by grace. It's not because I'm so smart or I'm so holy or I impressed God or I did this or that. It's by grace and grace alone. But at the same time, God says, like, hey, this is a relationship. Like, there's ways that you can participate in this thing. And he's given us these tools that we can use to seek him, to seek intimacy. This is what he's saying. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it will be open to you. This is what his promise is. And he's given us these tools that we can use in that process of seeking. See, that seeking is an action word. It's a verb. There's things that we can do. And I think in a lot of ways we tend to approach our Christian relationship with God like it's some kind of a cold, procedural, religious kind of thing that we just check things off and that's going to make us good. I don't think that's how it works. I think seeking God means doing the things that are within our ability to do, using the tools that God has given us to use, intentionally seeking intimacy with him. You think about it. If we, a lot of people talk about, I read scripture all day. I read 4 hours. I read the whole Bible this year. I go, that's great, but what'd you get out of it? Like, what was the intimacy you felt with your Creator through that? I mean, his word is a love letter to us, right? Every single passage is rich with truth about who God is, who Christ is, and what it means for us. That's all in there. And I think reading scripture as just an academic exercise is to miss the intimacy that's contained within it. I think every passage, I tell my guys all the time, like, I'm not going to ask you to read miles of scripture every day. But if you could tell me that you read one single verse today, but that you did it with an intent to be intimate with your Creator, that's a win. That's a win. We can worship. A lot of times we can go to church on Sundays and we could just do Christian karaoke. We're just standing there reading the words on the screen. Hey, the music's great. The music was good today. Music was bad, whatever. But that's not intimacy. See, God gives us worship as a route for intimacy with Him. And the way we do that is by, you look at the words on the screen and you sing them to God as a prayer. Make them your own. That's intimacy. We can we can pray, for God's sake. How often, I rarely meet Christian people that would tell me they pray as often as they feel like they should, right? And again, I'm not super impressed if someone tells me, I pray for 1 hour every morning or 2 hours every morning or every this or that. Like, okay, but are you praying in a way that is intimate with your Father? I think you can do that anywhere. And because I think prayer at its root, at its core, is about a relationship. You're speaking to your Father. How many people would you say you have a great relationship with that you never talk to? Or when you do talk to them, it's one-sided, where there's only one person talking, or you never really get that deep. Like a real close, tight relationship involves intimate communication. It's sharing your deepest thoughts. It's seeking intimacy. And a lot of times it just means being still and listening. And I think so often, again, our lives are so busy. They're so stressful. They're so strenuous that even our prayer lives, most of the time we just spend just going down our to-do list. We just spend talking, when I think a lot of times we need to say less and listen more and just foster that relationship, to knock on the door. In a lot of ways, here's how I look at it, and this is how I explained it to our students there and sitting in the snow on the side of the lake, is that in a lot of ways our relationship with God is like the relationship we have with a drowning person. We're the drowning person. And I've taken water rescue classes, and something they tell you in water rescue is that when a person is drowning, you don't want to swim out there and try to grab them, because a lot of times they are panicking. And what they'll do is they'll try to use you as a flotation device. And they'll actually end up taking you down with them. And then instead of one person drowning, now you have two. So they'll tell you one thing that you do is you wait. You wait until they are exhausted. And you wait till they have basically given up. And you wait till they are about to drown. And at that point, you jump in and you grab them, because they're not going to fight anymore. They're not going to put up a struggle. They're not going to grab you. They're just going to go with it. And there's something that happens when someone's about to drown and they're about to go underwater. And there's a reflex, there's an impulse within people to try to keep any part of themselves above the water. Even if it's not their nose or their mouth, they'll reach up and they'll stick their hand out of the water as the rest of them goes under. And I think that's the position that we need to try to get into with our spiritual walk. Excuse me. It's a lot of talking. I think that's the position of helpless submission. You see, so much of the time we're sitting there thrashing in the water, trying to tread water, trying to swim, trying to do whatever we can to save ourselves, when what we need to do is just stick our hand up. That's all we can do. Because here's the thing. When that person puts their hand up out of the water and they get rescued, how much work can they claim having done in that rescue? Not really any. All they did was have their hand up there, and the rescuer grabbed it. The rescuer pulled them. The rescuer saved them. The rescuer did this. The rescuer did everything. Everything. All they did was hold on for the ride. And I believe that's the position we have to take with this in a lot of ways. is just our job in our relationship with our Creator is to seek intimacy in the ways that we can. And really all that is we're just using the tools that God has given us, that He's equipped us with, that He empowers, that He equips, that He responds. And we're just putting our hand up. When I read Scripture, I'm seeking intimacy with Him. I'm putting my hand up in the air. I'm not trying to do this myself. I'm seeking intimacy. When I'm worshiping Him, when I'm praying in song to my Creator, I'm not doing it for me. I'm not doing it to try to survive. I'm just putting my hand up. And I think it's interesting that, putting our hands up in the air is like a thing in the Christian church, that we do during worship. And I think that's a lot more rich of a statement than people even realize they're doing. They're just putting their hands up. You're helpless. I have nothing to offer you. All I can do is reach up. I want to know you. I want to meet you. I want you to grab my hand. I want you to drag me to safety. And I'm so proud of our students because they, after we talked about that, we went off into the snow and, I think it was like 20 degrees outside. So we took like 10 minutes just to be still, just to be quiet. And they did. They took it seriously. And afterward, we talked to them like, what was God saying to you? And a lot of them were just talking about, like, God was showing me my idols. God was showing me that I can believe in Him. He was showing me that I can trust Him, but that I don't. A lot of conviction, a lot of truth, a lot of hard things. Amazing that these high schoolers would do this. And I we got them together afterward, and I told them, I don't have kids of my own, of course, so I don't know how much I would love my own kids. I'm sure that I would, but that I love these kids like they're my own kids. And I'm so proud of them for listening, for being willing to be honest about where they're at. And, I'm eager, I'm excited, I'm looking forward to them struggling further with this. And some of them still are, like I said. And I can't wait to see the fruit that comes from that, because I think these kind of struggles are the things when we define our faith. And they're doing that hard work now. And I think it's going to be gorgeous when they get to the end of that. In any case, on the back end of that trip, we spend the 2.5 days up there. Just a lot went down like that. A lot went down. And then on the ride back, after this, and by the way, the beds at Zephyr Point Conference Center were fantastic. The Tempur-Pedic beds, like legit Tempur-Pedic brand name beds. Couldn't believe it. I haven't slept that well in forever. It's ridiculous. So, but I still didn't sleep as much as I normally do. So you're short on sleep on these trips. But on the bus ride back, I found that to be such a fruitful time for these kids, because they've spent 2.5, almost 3 days together, concentrated church family community. And I think it's such a great time of reflection for them. And so what I do is I sit towards the front of the bus where it's quieter, and one at a time, I'll call up the guys in my group, and I basically make appointments with them. And I give them some questions the night before to run through, like how was your trip? What were the highs? What were the lows? What did God teach you? What's something that you need to start doing? What's something you need to stop doing? How can I be a better benefit to you? Things like that. So I have them write those questions down and think about them overnight. And then on the bus ride home, I call them up to the front, and then we go through those questions, and we talk about the answers, and then we pray together, and try to have some action steps, and like, what are we going to do when we get home? And it's so exhausting, but gosh, that time is so fruitful for these guys, and every single one of them just had some great nugget of understanding about their own life, about who they are, about who God is. Just some deep confession and some big decisions. Like, when I get home, I got to do this. I got to tell my dad about this thing. I got to confess this. I got to stop doing that. Like, Mr. Ryan Weber, like, can you help me with this? Like, I have these questions. And so proud of these guys for doing that. It's super humbling to be a part of that, and just to have the privilege of speaking into someone else's life like that and be trusted by the parents of these kids to take them off into the snow for 3 days and to play a role in them wrestling with who they're going to be. It's a glorious process, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be, really. Like, I tend not to actually take vacations myself, like, because these are the things that I want to do, and they're not restful. Like, I'm probably overdue for like a day on the couch around here just to recharge from all this, but nowhere else I'd rather be. Fortunately, the ride home was only like, I think it was like 7 hours. It wasn't that bad. Previous years, I think our record is like 15 hours or something like that. Ridiculous. Traffic is bad. The snow is bad. Whatever. But this one went by pretty well. It was super fast. Chase McBean did a great job piloting the bus. What a champ. And now we're back in town. And, the kids they're continuing. I think it's great that they're... Whoa, text message. That's bad podcasting faux pas right there. The kids are doing great, and I think the trip pushed them in ways, and it was interesting because I think a lot of them have been to enough of these camps that they are insulated a bit from that whole camp high thing, because the camp high goes away. And I don't think that really happened. They didn't really get that camp high. And I know some of them were disappointed by it, but I wasn't. Because I think the work that they did, what they did get, aren't things that go away. Like, they're asking questions that, as they construct answers to, it will actually change who they are. It's not something that's just based on some emotion or some good feeling or whatever. Like, and whatever. Feelings are great. I had a feeling once and it was great. But I think our one thing that we can do in our spiritual walks, a huge sign of maturity, is an untethering of our spiritual walk, or the condition of our relationship with Christ, to untether that from our current emotional condition, our current circumstance. And I think these kids are starting to realize that, gosh, my relationship with my Creator isn't always going to feel great, but He's still there. I'm not always going to feel wonderful, but these things are still true. I'm not always going to feel like following Him, but I can still decide to. I don't feel like worshiping, but I'm going to do it to seek intimacy with Him. I don't feel like reading my Bible. I don't feel. That's fine. There's nowhere in the Bible that it says we have to feel good about everything that we're doing. It doesn't. But it says follow. It says go. And I think that there's the amen for when we're happy, with our fists are up in the air. Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. But then at the same time, there's that lamenting, broken hallelujah. The prayers that we say when we just say, God, I don't feel you right now. I don't know if I like you right now. I don't know if I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But Lord, I know you're there, and I will follow you still. I think there is so much fruit in that kind of prayer. There's so much value in that kind of faith that is not based on my feelings, but is based on my calling. It's not based on the condition of my day, but it's based on the condition of my soul. And that is saved, and that it belongs to you, and I will serve you, I will follow you, and I will do these things, and I will have joy in my heart while I can have sorrow in my feelings. And I think that's an incredible lesson that our students are just starting to learn, and that I think, honestly, in my own life, that I'm just starting to be able to articulate well enough to teach them, to lead them through it. The timing is interesting on that, but again, it's a privilege to do so. And if for those of you who are who were in that group up there, I want to encourage you. Just from the depths of my heart, I'm so proud of you for being willing to look in the mirror, to be willing to see what's there, to ask yourself these hard questions, and to let the answers scare you a little bit and to shake you a little bit. That's fine. That's good. It's not shameful. It doesn't mean you're bad or God doesn't love you. It just means that you are now doing the hard work, doing the scary thing, but the incredibly fruitful thing of wrestling with your own faith and nailing this thing down for yourself. And from this side of it, I know that when you're in that kind of circumstance, it can be hard, and you don't know how it's going to turn out, and it's a little scary. I get it. It's uncharted turf for you, but for somebody in my position, I am genuinely already thanking God for the fruit that will come from you struggling to define your own faith, to make your own path, and to develop the discipline to put your hand up. So there's that. So with that, I'm going to wrap tonight up. I talked for way longer than I had originally intended, but thank you so much for listening to this, and I'm thankful to have an audience that is willing to hear my voice on these podcasts. I love doing this. I'm so thankful for this opportunity, and again, if you want to support what's going on here at the Great Stories Podcast, if you want these stories to get out, even the silly trucking stories, down to the deep-hearted testimonies, share these episodes. Go into the Apple Podcast, go into YouTube, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channels, support it in those platforms, and just spread the word about the show. I really think that, like I said, the world out there is struggling. It's seeking, it's desperate for real, authentic communication, real, authentic faith. And I think we have a God that provides that for us. And I think this is just one of the many, many, many outlets that he has enabled for people to find out who he is and what it means to follow him. So share the episodes. If you want to support the show, again, there is a Patreon account. Look for The Great Stories Podcast on Patreon. And as always, in a couple weeks, I'll be back with another guest and another testimony. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you, and good night.